Hello, everybody, and welcome to Powered4.tv. Your host here, John Scott, and I'm really pleased to say and humbled as well because this guy has been on our Powered4.tv. He's been there with Straight Talk Wrestling. He's been there for a while, but I reached out to you guys, I don't know, maybe a month ago or so, and I was like, I've been watching it, but I've got to get you on. I've got to get let's find out about the man behind it. Let's find out about the history, how you got into it, etc., etc. But we was just talking. Hang on, that's a terrible introduction. Let me introduce you first. Ridiculous of me. This is what the lockdown does for the likes of me. I tell you, sharing screens. But George McKay, how are you, my friend? All the way up there in Canada.
I'm good. Honestly, sir, John, it's a pleasure to finally sit down with you. It's a pleasure to be talking to the man behind Power TV. And you have helped astronomically. You and Johnner's Wrestling Network have helped astronomically in getting us out there in the UK, which is a great market, a great fan base for wrestling. And I'm humbled that you asked us to be on your kick-ass content because it gives us a chance to be interviewed, which, doesn't really happen too often, but when it does, it's something special. It's something super special, man.
Yeah, I always find it weird. Like, I'm doing this job, but like when I'm being the guest, I always find that hard. So you might find it's the same thing yourself. But the other thing, man, we were talking off air about, the whole lockdown and what it's meant for us in our sort of personal lives. But also, I was going to ask you, with your whole podcast and those things, were you doing interviews at shows and media at certain events like indie shows as well? Or have you always sort of just done it on the screens?
Well, I was originally doing, it was just a straight audio podcast for a very long time. And then I tried to get affiliated with Impact Wrestling. And the media manager for North America, Ross Foreman, great guy, he actually called me. And we had like a 45-minute conversation. And he's like, I like what you're doing, but a couple things have to change. First off, your social media numbers are horrible. We need to get those up. And also, I noticed you have a YouTube page, but you've got like 8 subscribers. Like, why are you not utilizing it? I'm like, well, we're just kind of an audio-based podcast. He goes, well, audio is great, but I mean, video is the now. Video is what everybody's doing. And at the time, the pandemic had just started. So he's like, why don't you try doing it and getting names? So I was like, okay. So I'm sitting there going, Canadian guy, who do I get? I got to get one of the ladies, the 4 founding ladies of pro wrestling. So my first ever vidcast, as I call them, was with Lufisto. And we sat down, we had a kick-ass conversation. I released it. And then all of a sudden the subscriber count went from like 8, which had been for 3 years because I never utilized the YouTube platform. And then I look one day and I get all these notifications on my phone. Like, what the hell's going on? And then it's like 40 subscribers. And I'm like, whoa, one video? I got that? I'm like, all right, let's do another one. And then Vicky Guerrero came on, and then it started steamrolling, and then TJP. And then it was like, all of a sudden I'm having conversations with these people that I had idolized and respected in this business for so long. And then it's like, holy crap, I can make something of this. And then my daughter saw the numbers coming and she's like, well, Dad, I want to start my own YouTube page. And I'm like, whoa, hold on. I'm not ready to release you to the world, especially on YouTube where people can be, as much as people can be endearing, let's be honest, they can be vicious and they can rake you over the coals. And to expose a 9-year-old at the time to that, I was like, no way. So I was sitting down with my wife one day and I was like, how do I incorporate her into the show? And my wife was like, well, we've got to find something. Like, you do the interviews, you do the full-length interviews. What if we did like an interview with her, but we condensed it down? And I'm like, what about 5 questions? She asked 5 questions. She's got to keep a couple of them wrestling related because this is a wrestling podcast, but she can ask anything. And then we just started. We went to the final show we went to right before the pandemic started. We went and was at a Battle Arts Academy show, which is ran by Santino Marella, or was formerly run by Santino Marella. And we sat down with, at the time, Amy Crimson, who has been recently back on the show, and Bianca Corelli. And then all of a sudden, I just saw how natural she was in front of the camera. I'm like, Jesus, this kid's better than me. She's like a star in the making. So we just started doing that. And then the blessing of technology was that, and the pandemic, a lot of people had open schedules, because not everybody was working. So all of a sudden people are at home. they're checking their emails more frequently. They're checking their DMs more frequently. And it just kind of became this steamroll. And it's been a ride. I'm coming up on my 200 episode, which is next week. Michael Bennett is dropping this week, this Thursday, 6:15 p.m. Eastern on YouTube and on all audio platforms. And to sit there and say that I've talked to Michael Bennett and now I've got my 200th episode, like 200. When we started this 4 years ago, me, my former co-hosts, the three of us, when we started this, we never thought it would go as far as it did. And then when things came in the way and we had differences of how the product was going to work, I took it and I ran with it. And it's been a whirlwind, man. It's been a blessing to have met people like you and have connections with people like you. Like, we're in 2 different time zones, but we've been talking and conversating for the last 4 or 5 months. I feel like I know you. I feel like if I were to go over to the UK, we'd be sitting down right now at a pub, we'd be drinking a pint, and we'd be talking about life. You know what I mean?
We would. Drowning our sorrows. Yeah, I'm sure we would, my friend. I'm sure we would, talking some wrestling in all those areas. But, you know, I'm totally with you. Big shout out as well to your daughter. She does an amazing job. You're right. She is very natural. I have to say, she's got very, she's very likable person and screen presence, which is, I tell you, mate, when I first started this, especially on like doing videos, oh my God, I was like my biggest critic, because I was going back watching myself. And you know what it's like when you do podcasts, and I tell people this all the time, when I first started doing podcasts, I would pick up on certain words I keep saying, and it drives me mad. I was like, what am I doing? But over time, I don't know, I just kind of think, you know what, I'm past that now. I don't critique as much, but I tell you, when I first started out, my friend, I was a nervous wreck. I just could not stand even seeing myself. But yeah, I mean, technology has kind of allowed us to be more connected with everybody. You know, here on Powered 4, we've got so many promotions across the pond, in Europe, in Australia. So it's kind of a blessing in a lot of ways, because, you know, in times like this, there's always people about. I'm totally with you on when this COVID first hit, about people's availability, because all of a sudden, guys I couldn't get on the show, they were like asking me if they could come on. So I knew they were bored, quite frankly, you know. But I've got to ask you, how did you first, what was your first exposure into this crazy world that we call professional wrestling, my friend? How did you get hooked?
So it was Christmas Eve. I was 4 or 5, and my cousins, and we were all wrestling downstairs, and they were mentioning like, I'm going to be Hulk Hogan and I'm going to be Macho Man. And I'm like, I'm going to be a Ninja Turtle. I don't know who those people are. And then my cousin's like, you don't know wrestling? I was like, no, what's that? So my uncle had a bootleg tape of the famous Madison Square Garden event, Jimmy Superfly Snuka off the steel cage. He had a tape of that. I don't know where he got it from. It was a bootleg tape, but he had it, and he threw it on. And here I am, 5 years old, stuffing my face with whatever goodies were around, because it's Christmas Eve, and you don't care about your teeth when you're 5 years old, because you know they're going to fall out and you'll get your adult teeth. So I'm sucking back cookies, and all of a sudden I see this larger-than-life dude just climb the top of this cage and do the Superfly, you know, pose, and then he jumps. And I was just like, he's going to kill himself. They're going to go through that ring. And, oh, my God. And it was just one of those moments in time where I was like, I don't know what this stuff is, but I want more of it. Mm-hmm. I want to watch more of it. I want it to become part of my life. And that's where it went. All of a sudden, Saturday mornings, everyone in the house, my sisters and my parents knew, from 10 to 11, do not touch the TV. Do not look at it. Saturday night is all me. That's me. Don't look. Don't even go anywhere near the remote. You're not allowed. And Saturday night sprung into, you know, pay-per-views. Pay-per-views sprung into, and Monday Night Raw. When Raw started, I never missed it. I never missed a Raw. For the first couple of years, I was hooked. And then obviously the Attitude Era started, and the Monday Night Wars, and everything. I was probably, I want to say, a faithful fan from like 1980, 7, 88. All the way up to 2004. And then I fell out of things for a bit, because my wife and I, who's also a diehard wrestling fan, we were planning a wedding. We welcomed the birth of the mini host, And, you know, we were trying to get a house, we're trying to get established. Life kind of got in the way. And then one day the network started up and my wife's like, well, it's free for $9.99 a month. Because at the time that was everything that, you know, you can get all this content for $9.99 JBL, right?
Yeah.
So, all right, let's try it. So we ended up watching that WrestleMania that year. And I have my friends over, my co-hosts at the time, who weren't my co-hosts yet. And we were just sitting around. We were like, man, we have so much knowledge about this, even though we've been out of it for 10 years. Like, you can go back and pick up wrestling anytime. And that's the cool thing. The stars may change, but the storylines and everything centered around the business is exactly the same. Mm-hmm. So all of a sudden we're like, well, we should start it. And then we hummed and hawed. And then finally I called my friend up, my former co-host, Steve the Animal Mitchell. I said, forget it. Fuck it. We're going to do it. Come over right now. I found this website that we can record like a 15-minute podcast. And if we like how it sounds, then we can do the month-to-month hosting thing. And we did it. It was horrible. We called ourselves Real Talk Wrestling, and we had no idea that there was already a Real Talk Wrestling out there. So once we found out, we're like, okay, we got to change everything. And then we're just like, well, we're both straight up. We love to talk, and we love to talk wrestling. So Straight Talk Wrestling just came naturally to who we were as a brand at the time. And we were just doing Raw and SmackDown reviews, and we were like, oh my God, this is horrible. Like, everybody else is doing this. We have to do something different. So we started doing superstar profiles. We started picking our favorite wrestlers and doing like an A&E biography on that. And that started to get a little traction. Then we started doing prediction shows. That started to get a little traction. Then we dived into the interviews. And our first interview that we ever did was with a great local promoter down here, George the Iceman, who runs Destiny Pro Wrestling, which is a fantastic promotion. They brought in amazing guys from the UK, you know, your Pete Dunnes, your Trent Sevens, your Tyler Bates, Marty Scurll before all the speaking out stuff, everything. And we sat down with him, and through him, he opened the doors to us, allowed us to come, you know, tap into his roster, tap into his venue. And then from there, we started getting deep into the local indie scene over here. And then in the span of a couple weeks, we were like, man, this has been in our backyards the whole time. Like, what the hell have we been doing? There's so much of a world out there past your WWEs and your WCW classic content and all this. There's a whole world that I never knew about. And I'm sitting there going, damn, like, and that's when I discovered Josh Alexander. I'm like, this guy is the fucking king. And then he got signed to Impact right as we were gaining traction ourselves. And I posted that video clip of Scott D'Amore at a Destiny show telling Josh, you're not the best unsigned talent in the world. You're the hottest rising star in Impact, and you got a 3-year deal. And I posted the clip, and the thing went viral. You know when you just post something and you forget about it? I went to Twitter. I woke up, I went to bed, woke up the next morning, had my coffee, had my morning cigarette, and I'm standing outside. I'm like, oh, let's check social media, see what's going on. I go to my Twitter, the Straight Talk Twitter, and I'm like, 726 notifications. What the fuck? So I spent literally the next hour going through all this stuff, all these notifications, and who is this guy? We got to follow him. And Josh Alexander, this is crazy. And Impact Wrestling's retweeting it. And I'm like, what the fuck is happening here? That video went on to have like 35,000 views. Wow. I'm sitting there going, holy fuck. And it was just a 10-second clip. And the thing was that when I left that event that night, I was checking. Nobody else had posted. I'm like, well, fuck. If nobody wants to spread the news, like, I'm going to spread the fucking news.
One of the great things about your show on Straight Talk Wrestling, my friend, and especially when I listen to you, is that you, and it's difficult because I hear a lot of hosts, both videos and podcasts, sometimes like content creators, and it's hard because sometimes when you've been watching wrestling as much as us, you know, don't get me wrong, as much as I love wrestling, it can grate on you at times. So when you come on and do videos and reviews and all the rest of it, it's hard to be like upbeat and kind of passionate, but you are very good at that, my friend. I mean, you kind of come on and you kind of no crap, you know, gonna get to the point. I was listening to a review the other day and I was like, you just sold that to me. Like, I didn't know half the guys you were talking about for this various show. And I was like, I'm hooked because you were so passionate about it. And that's, it's a hard thing to stay at that level because I think people I know that have been doing this for years, I don't think they realize it, but they kind of come on and the first things are always quite negative. And then it's kind of like, that's how the show goes for about 90%. And I don't know that they consciously know that that's how they're sort of coming across. But it's a tough thing. I mean, what is your? Do you have that kind of like thing in your subconscious that like I'm just going to try and be upbeat? I'm going to try and just hit the positives. Yeah, we're going to talk about the negatives, but we're not going to like just focus on that the entire show.
For me, I had an epiphany a couple years ago. It was actually my wife that gave me the kick in the ass. I was incredibly angry all the time, not about wrestling, just about everything in life. I didn't feel like my life was where it needed to be. I was unhappy in my job. I was unhappy with just where I had been in my life. And I wasn't focusing on the positives, which is my beautiful wife, my two beautiful daughters, being a girl dad, being everything. And my wife kind of sat me down one day and she goes, I'm so exhausted from having to worry about who I'm going to see that morning. Am I going to see the upbeat George, or am I going to see the George, right? And I kind of sat back and I was like, whoa, I don't want to lose the person who I've pledged my life with. So I reached out to my doctor and I said, I think I need to talk to someone. I need a perspective. I need help in figuring out who I am. And that led to therapy, and I'm very open and very honest about it, especially with Mark Merrow. That guy got me to open up like the floodgates, and he was supposed to be my guest. And I'm sitting there going, my grandfather. I was just so over emotional with him because he's just one of those guys that resonates positivity. And I sat down and I said, you know what, I need to figure out who I am, because this is not healthy for myself. I'm killing myself. I'm hurting my family. I'm distancing my family. I don't want to do that anymore. And I sat down, started going to therapy weekly or bi-weekly. And in that, working through all of my issues from my past and issues that I was holding on to. I was a big grudge holder. I would like, if I was stemmed or something was wronged in my life when I was 7, I held on to that at like 30. Right. And you know how that eats away at you when you're holding on to something that happened when you were a kid? Like, get past that. You got to work through it. And through the dedication of myself, putting the work in, and having my wife there as a great support system, I came out better. I still have a ton of work to do. Day to day, it's a working basis, but I came out better. And when I interview someone, I always have that big smile on my face. Let me welcome, Straight Talk. And when I'm bigging up a show or bigging up a thing, nothing's going to be perfect. You're never going to go to a show that bell to bell, you're going to walk out going, oh my God, that was the best show in the history of the world. You're going to go out and you're going to be like, matches 2, 3, and 6 were awesome. Matches 4 and 7, they weren't awesome. But there was bright spots. There was positives in a bad match. You can have positives. So whenever I'm bigging up a show or anything like that, I could go out there and be like, well, I hate this person and I don't think they should be wrestling and I think they're horrible. But why? Because you know what? They're doing what none of us have the balls to do. I love wrestling, but I could never step in a ring. Are you kidding me? If I stepped in a ring with somebody like Bobby Lashley, I would pee my pants. If I stepped in a ring with somebody like Drew McIntyre, somebody like Tyrus, somebody like Nick, if Nick Aldis was standing in front of me, I would pull a Kevin Nash. I would lay down and be like, just pin me, because I don't want to have any broken bones. Like, people don't realize what these guys do, these guys and girls do day to day is an art form. And they put their lives on the line for us to entertain us. Whether you love the guy or hate the guy, that's the business. You could say, I'm not a fan of this guy. But me, I'm a fan of everybody. Like, I'm not a big fan of Roman Reigns. I'll admit that. I think Roman Reigns, even now as the tribal chief, I don't want to acknowledge him. I don't. He makes my skin crawl. I look at him and I go, I remember you from Shaw and Hobbs, and you were horrible walking out there with your long flowing hair when they did the sun shot. And I'm like, you suck. But at the same time, is Roman Reigns the best thing that WWE has going heel-wise right now? Yes, he is. So I can acknowledge him that way. There's always positives to the negatives. Wrestling fans are the best fans in the world because we voice our opinions. Whether you want to hear us or not, we're going to make you hear us. But the thing is I will never, ever shit on someone without finding the positives in that person. Roman Reigns versus Cesaro, one of the best matches I've seen Roman Reigns have this year. Hands down. Told a great story. And I have a fellow podcaster, Clark Street Wrestling, great guys. One of the co-hosts is like Roman Reigns fanboy. And I said, you know what? After that match, I had to acknowledge him. I had to use the pun. And I will always say that no matter what, I want to promote wrestling. I want to promote the sport that we love, the sport that I love, the sports I'm so passionate about. So when I'm selling a show or selling a product, if I don't know somebody on the card, Google's your friend. Now, does Google give you everything factual? Absolutely not. There's been times that Google has burned me in the ass. I'll be like, and I always say this now, whenever I'm doing my research, you know, the internet is fickle. It'll tell you what it wants to tell you, but it won't ever tell you the whole truth. But if I don't know somebody, I'll Google a match and I'll spend 10 minutes watching the match and be like, okay, I get why this person's on the card. I'm going to big them up. And the review you're probably talking about was GSW, Catalyst. Great local American promotion. I had Brandon Ascari on the show. He's one of the founders. And they're just a startup promotion that just has this chip on their shoulder. Like they want you to notice what they're doing. And they're going to start off small, but they're going to keep getting bigger. And they've had some amazing, and that event was incredible. One of the best, and I was just excited about it. I was excited about, that was the first part of my vacation. I've been off since last Friday. So I'm like, man, I'm going to sit down and watch wrestling. I have my co-host from MLW Rewind over because we both had our poke appointments, and we were just watching it, and it was just electric. And for us, it brought us back to our indie feel because we don't have any shows right now. So if I could pay $20 and support a great indie promotion with great talent, I'm going to do that because they deserve to be highlighted just as much as the big promotions. And at the end of the day, we have to remember that the little guys, they have the future. They have the guys we want to see on weekly episodic television. So why would I not pay attention? And were some of the matches bad? Of course they were. But did they have bright spots? Yes, they did. They had something that makes me want to go back and watch what happens next time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And thank you for sharing some of that, man, because, you know, I can relate to some of that stuff as well. I want to say, when we talk about, like, as you get a little bit older and you realize there's independent wrestling around, and there's more to wrestling than just the WWE and all the rest of it, you're like, hang on a minute, like, it is like a whole new world. I mean, when I was exposed to it, I was like, I just didn't see it coming. And all of a sudden, you know, you're going to these shows and the experience of a wrestling show, like, there's some, obviously there's positives and negatives. No, you're not going to get the giant superstars. You're not going to get John Cena rocking up and, you know, all the rest of it. However, the positives are most indie shows, look, there you can be a lot closer to the ring. You can see things you wouldn't normally see, especially if you go to a WWE show. I remember a couple of years ago, probably on the last tour WWE I had a family reach out to me and they said, like, I want to take my kids to a WWE show. I'm not sure what to book. Should I go to a Raw or should I just go to one of their live shows? And I was like, you know what? You'd probably be best on a live show because even though it's not Raw is just such made for television. I mean, there's so many stop starts in it. It kind of really takes you out of what on earth you're watching, and it's very much for TV. So I was like, if they like watching wrestling, you're probably better off that. You know, it's one of those difficult things. But I was going to ask you, because obviously with us on Powered4.tv, we have a lot of independent wrestling, and a lot of the fans that go and watch those shows. Then they get Powered 4 and they re-watch it with maybe their family, maybe their kids or whatever, but they see it from a different light because all of a sudden they've got commentators over the top of it. And it just has this different feel. However, what I was going to say to you is that's been like the reverse sometimes, because this family that went to that WWE show, they said when they first got in there, the big thing that was missing was just hearing the commentators. It was like, yes, it was just sucked out of you. It's like the beginning was hyper, everyone was excited. And then like the dad was telling me, it was like, there were so many fans that even though they was really happy before they got in there, they were kind of like just negative, like, oh, we know this is going to happen next, or this is going to happen next. And I was kind of thinking to myself, realistically, that's probably where the WWE audience is at right now. I mean, they've been educated in such a way, probably by WWE in a lot of respects, to go into these shows and, like, instead of just being a fan, just enjoy it, go out. Okay, you either disliked it or you didn't, but like, I know what they're talking about. And you've probably, I don't know if you've been to a WWE show of late or how long ago it was, but like, you know, that feeling is when you get in there, everyone's super pumped, everyone's happy, and then all of a sudden it starts, it's like, oh, this is again, and it's crazy, isn't it? But why do you think, like, I'm interested to hear from your perspective, from someone in it for so long, do you think that's just down to the crazy exposure that fans have now as kind of, like I mentioned earlier, with that education. And do you ever think that we'll ever get back to a time where maybe people will show up to a show and be like, yeah, I'm just going to watch it. I'm just going to watch what's in front of me, and I'll go away either happy or sad, those emotions, whatever they give me. But like, it's kind of like when they're sitting there, they're playing Booker. And I know there was a wrestler, he spoke to me the other day, and he said, I can see it getting to the point where promoters start to say, you know what, we'll give a VIP ticket where the fans can come in, they can go backstage, and they can sit down with both the guys when they work out their match. And then they'll go and watch it, just as an extra, because that's where we're getting to these days. But what is your take with that? Because obviously you like me, you've seen this business evolve into what it is now. Do you ever think we'll get back to that feeling, casual fans showing up and just enjoying the product?
You know what? I do. I do think we'll get back there, but I also think we have to be realistic. The curtain was pulled back in '96. Let's be honest. When the curtain call happened, that started everything. All of a sudden, good guys and bad guys can be friends. Good guys and bad guys can like each other. No, no, you're a liar. You're a horrible person. Why would you even do? No, wrong. But all of a sudden, we're getting educated, and then the internet became a thing, and everything is out there. No matter what, like we knew about Velveteen Dream being released before Velveteen Dream knew he was going to be released.
Yeah.
Like, well, actually, I'm pretty sure he knew. Let's be honest. But I don't think we'll ever get to a point where the casual fan will be happy or sad. But I feel we'll get to a point where the casual fan will just go and watch it. Whenever I go to a show, whether it's a WWE show, and the last show that I've been to was when it was SummerSlam here in Toronto, 2019, right before the pandemic. Right before that was the big one. We were floor seats. I have my 3 chairs that I paid, $500 a pop for, and I got some awesome chairs out of that. They're comfortable. They cushion your butt really well. And we watched it. We had a great time. I was a big Fiend guy, so I got my, my Yowie Wowie shirt before anybody else got it. I got my Kevin Owens Fight Toronto Fight shirt. I was just over the moon about that. Must have spent, not going to lie, probably spent about $700 in merch. Like, I went apeshit. I wanted everything. I even wanted an Uso shirt. And at the time, the Usos weren't even on the card. Whatever, you just want everything. Easy. But we had so much fun, and we took our daughter. That was her first show, and that was our first major 4. We had been to Raws, we had been to SmackDowns, but my wife and I had never been to a SummerSlam, a Royal Rumble, WrestleMania, or Survivor Series. And when they were coming here, I said to my wife, fuck it, YOLO. You only live once. We got to do it. So we did. We had a great time and a great weekend. And it was something so special to see it through my daughter's eyes. That was the most exciting part. And I think that's what we all need to get back to. We need to get back to being kids again when it comes to wrestling. Pick your heroes, pick your villains, go in understanding that you're not going to see the most amazing card you've ever seen just because you're there. It's not like WWE goes and goes, oh, hey, listen, George and his family are in the crowd tonight. So forget everybody else. Let's put on a show for George. We have to be realistic. And are the storylines built to ways we know? Yes, but the storylines are built that way in every aspect of wrestling. You've got a good guy. You've got a bad guy. Sometimes the storylines get personal and they get real, and family members get brought into it. But for the most part, it's entertainment, and that's what we need to remember. So whenever I go to an indie show, or whenever I go to a big production show, I go into it as a kid. I go into it looking through my daughter's eyes and seeing her heroes. When she saw Becky Lynch come out at SummerSlam, she was crying. When she saw Sasha Banks come out at SummerSlam, she was crying. She's like, "Oh my God, they're here, my hero!" And that made me, as a father, I'm getting emotional now thinking about it. That made me well up, because I remember seeing the Rocks and the Stone Colds and the Bret Harts coming out. Like, I met Bret Hart for the first time when I was 35 years old. And I went up to him and I was like, "Man, I got to give you a hug. You were my childhood." And he was like, all right. And he was cool about it and stuff. And then, I probably held on for 3 seconds longer than I should have. Then it just got awkward because I was just like, "Oh my God, it's Bret Hart." And he's like, all right. But you got to go into it thinking like a kid. You got to go in being a kid. And I've gone to indie shows where I've seen an indie talent, a young talent, first match. They go up and they slip off the ropes. And hear somebody go, look at that. He should have been trained longer. And you turn around and you just go, like, I've told fans off. I go, listen, Why don't you step in there? Why don't you step in there, climb that top rope, and tell me how easy it is? But instead, your fat ass can just sit there and suck down 3 more hot dogs, okay, and then get heart failure when you're 40. But the fact is, we have to go into every show remembering that these are people who are living out their dream, and I'm not going to shit on anybody's dream. Again, there have been bad matches that I've watched, but at the end of the day, I'll always find a bright spot in the match. You know, the match was horrible, but that one tree of woe into the super kick was just stellar, or that Samoan drop was crisp, or when that frog splash happened, the height that he got. At the end of the day, I'm not going to shit on the business of my love, but I am going to look through it through a kid's eyes. And I think that's what keeps me so positive about everything that I do, because I look at it like I'm still a kid. I look at it like I'm just when I have an interview lined up, I'm like, man, I woke up this morning, had my cup of coffee. I'm like, man, I'm so excited to talk wrestling today, just because that's what I love. And why would I shit on the product that I love? The fans that do that are the fans that are straight up 150% AEW marks. AEW is the future, apparently. Not really. AEW has a ton of work to do, and AEW makes mistakes all the time. And the one thing that I'll say this is AEW finds its way to take shots at WWE every chance they get. But does WWE take shots at them? No, very rarely. So you want to go and you want to be fresh and different, but yet you want to start a beef or start a war with somebody who doesn't want to start a war with you. Why can't there be room for WWE marks and AEW marks? Why do we got to hate each other? Why does it got to be, the Capulets and the Montagues? Why does this got to be this Romeo and Juliet bullshit? At the end of the day, if you're a wrestling fan, just enjoy wrestling. Do I watch AEW on a regular? No. Do I watch WWE on a regular? No. Do I watch indie stuff on a regular? Yes. Do I watch NWA stuff on a regular? Hell yes. Do I enjoy that stuff? 150%. Is it good and bad?
Yeah.
Of course it is. But the great thing about all that product is that it keeps me entertained. And that's the most important thing.
Spot on, mate. Spot on. I totally agree with that. And a few things I wanted to pick up on there. You mentioned seeing things through your daughter's eyes. That's got to be I can imagine that's a really good, because I've got nobody around me in the children category that I can just, ask on the spot, like, what do you think of this? Or what's this doing for you? But that's a massive good gauge reader of what's hitting, what's not, what's popular to them. Is there anybody that your daughters are like totally into? Is she got like a particular wrestler you thought like you just couldn't recognize it, you couldn't like realize why she was liking it, but it just threw you off a little bit? Is there anybody that's come up in the last couple of years?
Yeah, so for my 5-year-old, because she's just getting into stuff now, she's obsessed with Asuka, but she doesn't call her Asuka. She calls her the rainbow-haired girl. I like the rainbow-haired girl. I like the rainbow girl. Okay.
Yeah.
So whenever Asuka's on, and no matter what, like Asuka comes out and does her entrance, and my 5-year-old goes, wow, that entrance was Daddy, her entrance was so cool. Did you see her spinning around? I go, what do you mean, going like this? Like she just spun around. Like it wasn't. She's like, no, but did you see what she did? And then I'll sit there, and Asuka will have a killer match, and I'll be like, Ari, did you see when she put her knee into her face? Yeah, but that's not nice, Daddy. What do you mean that's not nice? That's the whole point of this. One person has to beat up the other person. You have to have a clear winner. You can't. You have to. No, Daddy, she should just hug it. She should just hug her and be friends. No, that's not. If that happened,
that'll change.
Not watching any of this. Could you imagine that? Charlotte Flair and Asuka come out and they just hug before the match even starts, and you're like, what's going on? Cheers. But through the mini host tastes have evolved. She used to love, in the beginning, she loved Charlotte Flair. She loved Kairi Sane. She loved Bianca Belair. She still loves Bianca Belair. But now, her all-time favorite, who's been consistent since the first time she saw her, which was at the very first NXT Takeover, we watched it, and that's where we got hooked on everybody. But she just was drawn to Sasha Banks. Sasha Banks in her eyes can do no wrong. And we've had heated arguments about Sasha Banks. We, believe it or not, we have had like these heated arguments, and they're not negative. I'm just trying to tell her things that we all know about Sasha Banks. Even Sasha Banks hasn't come out and admitted it. Does she need work on her promos? Sasha Banks has said, yes, I do. I work on my promos every day. But to the mini host, no. Sasha Banks' promo was perfect. Nothing Sasha Banks does is there's no wrong. And I'll be sitting there, I'll be like, buddy, you have to be realistic. Sasha Banks herself has admitted she needs work on her promos. No, I don't care. She does. She's perfect. All right. So I just throw my hands up at that point. I go, there's no point in and even my wife will be like, why are you fighting with your 11-year-old? I'm like, I'm not fighting. I'm trying to educate her. She's like, but she doesn't need to be educated. She doesn't care. I'm like, you're right. You're right. At the end of the day, so like we did the our top 5 women's wrestlers for Off the Mat Wrestling, another great wrestling group. And we got heated right before I pushed record. She's like, okay, so we're agreed that number 1 is Sasha Banks. I'm like, absolutely not. No way. No way. I'm like, I'll put her in the top 5 cast, but she's not number 1. She's like, well, Dad, it's going to happen. So if you go back and watch that video, there's so many times where I'm like, I don't agree with number 1 at all. I don't. And she just looks at me. She's like she just gives me this face. But at the end of the day, Sasha Banks for her, she's obsessed with. And my 5-year-old, she flip-flops. She really likes, I gave her this old Shawn Michaels action figure that I found at an indie show. I bought it for like $3. And now she's like, how come I don't see this guy anymore? And I keep telling her, I'm like, well, buddy, when Daddy was a kid, he was a wrestler. And he also had 2 straight eyes. Now he doesn't. Now they go like this. But he was when I was a kid. She's like, well, I wanted to watch him. And I was like, okay, let's sit down and watch him. So I put on, Brett versus Shawn, right? WrestleMania 12. She watched like 4 minutes and was like, okay, I don't want to watch this anymore. I was like, wow. Like he zip lines down and she's like, okay, I'm over it. I'm like,
I'm done. Yeah.
But they both have their selection processes. And the best is when they fight. Because if Sasha Banks ever faces Asuka, it's a war in our house. Rainbow Hair Girl's going to
go out.
The boss is going to win. And it's just like, oh my God. I just sit back and I tell my wife, Tag, you're in. I'm not getting involved in any of this. I'm not doing it.
Can you imagine showing up at a show that you've booked, and you've taken both your daughters, and that's the match? What the ride home would be like for you? Unless they end it in a draw, maybe. But there you go. That's going to happen down the line now. I've cursed that for happening. But
thanks a lot. Thank you so much. I'm going to go. I'm going to go Facebook Live, and I'm going to tag you in the Facebook Live and be like, "You're going to watch this. This is your
fault." Now with Straight Talk Wrestling, obviously you've said you've adapted from podcast into video. Are there more plans for you down the line, like when things start opening up again, that you want to expand into, or you want to do any other stuff, or are you just going to kind of keep what you've been doing and go with that, or do you want to do more stuff with like more promotions and going forward?
Absolutely. There's a couple of indie promotions down here that are getting started up. They're doing a weekly episodic YouTube shows, and I don't want to curse anything or anything like that, but one of them is looking at me as a backstage correspondent. So I would be back there doing what, Gia Miller does or Kayla Braxton does. And they're also looking at me to possibly fill in a commentary from time to time, which would be really exciting for me. But also, too, just looking at life and how busy things are getting. My wife and I and my daughter, we've all discussed, because my wife's very involved in the podcast, even though you don't see her on it. She's very involved in the process. She also runs the mini host social media. So we've kind of talked about it. We might even be scaling back to going to like twice a month, just because, work is getting hectic, and school and online school, and there's just not enough family time. Whenever we're home, we're doing wrestling stuff, and it's great. But at the same time, too, you want to go out, you want to experience things, even though you can't do much, just going somewhere, blasting some music, driving in the car, and just driving up the countryside. That in itself is one of the coolest things that you can do as a family now, and just experience life. And we've missed out on some of that. So, but definitely want to get into the commentary stuff, and I also want to get into the backstage correspondent, but also just want to go to shows, discover more talent, and continue to highlight the Canadian talent that we have here on a regular basis, because that's one of the things. There are great talent from all over the world that gets highlighted. Japanese talent, Asian talent, UK talent, US talent. Talent from South America and Brazil and Mexico. But a lot of the times, Canadian talent, it's a struggle for them to get highlighted because of travel restrictions, not with COVID, just visas. Getting a visa for a Canadian wrestler, that's why Josh Alexander, it took so long for him to be discovered, because there was consistent red tape and crap that we had to deal with just to get them into the US. And it shouldn't be like that. It really shouldn't. But it's a struggle for a lot of Canadian performers. And that's kind of something I want to advocate more for is, give Canada a chance. Have eyes on the North. What we can bring to the table is something fresh and different that a lot of people have not seen.
No, absolutely. Just you saying about that with the Canadian performers, I've heard this before as well. That from a few guys I know in Canada, they tell me like there's such a hotbed of talent, but they're just not getting the exposure that everywhere else is. And it's kind of odd because when I was growing up, Canada was like almost there was as many Canadian wrestlers as I knew American wrestlers. I mean, even WWF at the time, you Canadian wrestlers were quite, the big thing. Everyone was raving, and it was like, most of it, of course, from Stu Hart and guys like that. You'd always heard that background, but there were just like a load of Canadian performers. But you're right, we don't hear as much of that now. If anything, like it was almost alien if you saw many UK wrestlers at the time. I mean, you had British Bulldog. You had anybody that was English came over and played the snob gimmick most of the times. It was very much like, yeah, that's your thing. But now it's like, okay, there's quite a lot of UK talent here, there, and everywhere. And I'm surprised that like we haven't seen, like I know they've got NXT UK here, but I'm surprised they haven't done like Canada's version of NXT. Like where's theirs? Because why are they not doing that? Is that just because of what you just said there, or is there more to it? Do you think? Because it is a strange one when you really think about it.
You do. You think about it, and I think the connection to Canada unfortunately died when Stu Hart passed away, when the Montreal screw job happened, and also Owen Hart when the tragedy that happened to Owen Hart happened, and actually we just passed the anniversary of that. When the tragedy of Owen Hart's passing happened, all of a sudden, Canada was alienated because certain executives in WWE thought it was better to just wipe us off the board. But much like NXT, the original NXT, when it started, we're still here. We're going to kick in the door whether you wanted to or not. And that's kind of one of the reasons that I love highlighting the Canadian talent that we have. And there's some great talents from Jeremy Prophet to Frankie the Beast King to, again, local Ontario talent like Alexi Nicole, the Bubblegum Princess, like Jody Threat, like, Josh Alexander, like Speedball Mike Bailey. These are Holden Albright. These are awesome Canadian talents that don't have the platform other than locally here, and some of them may not want it. I'm not speaking for them, but I believe they should be highlighted, and they should be. And I've said it for years. And Jeremy Prophet, who is also with another great podcast, Joe Fo in the Ring. They're based out of Montreal. The only thing we disagree on, obviously, is the Montreal Canadiens and the Toronto Maple Leafs, who are up 3-1 in the series. By the way, Joe Fo, but we need an NXT North. That's what it should be called. That's what it should be highlighted, and we need that here. And there was a kind of, I guess you want to say, a pipeline with Santino Marella with Battle Arts, Anthony Corelli. He has that connection to WWE, but now he's sold Battle Arts to two great owners, Dave and AC from Hamilton Pro Wrestling. Hamilton is a small city here in Ontario, and they've taken it over. And obviously, everything's kind of stonewalled with COVID, but once we get up and running, they are really pushing it to be the Ontario Performance Center. They're pushing it to be the mecca of sports in Ontario, from hockey to baseball to working out to bodybuilding to wrestling to judo, boxing, the whole 9 yards. And they're going to do some great things with it. But now that pipeline is not so much there. And I've had some wrestlers that have gone over to train in the U.S. Isaiah Bronson went over to train with oh my God, he's going to kill me for this. Booker T went to go train with Booker T, and he was trying to get booked on AEW, and nobody would give him a chance. Nobody would give him an opportunity, and it's sad. And he messaged me frustrated and said, even me, he's like, you're highlighting this American talent. I'm like, hold on, time out. I'm not highlighting American talent. There's no American, Canadian, UK. If it's a talent I like, I'm just highlighting talent. And there's somebody I want to talk to, I'm going to talk to them. But I big up Canada as often as I can. And I think that we need to have a platform here. I mean, NXT UK is great. It's something I enjoy, absolutely. But why can't Canada have one? Why can't, why can't Japan have one? You said you wanted NXT to take over the world. Well, Canada's waiting. Canada has some of the best talents here, and we need to be showcased. And like I said, our women, I'm a big advocate of women's wrestling because I'm a girl dad, because I want my daughters to have heroes. Our women here, man, they would put, I'm not going to lie, if we ever had an NXT UK versus NXT North, don't get me wrong, I know the ladies over there can handle themselves, but I think these Canadian girls, they're going to hurt the UK. If we ever get the opportunity, they're going to hurt the UK. And
there you go. You heard it. You heard it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was going to say, like, if anything, I feel like the WWE could gain a hell of a lot just from both lots of. I mean, there's so many women's wrestling in terms of NXT UK. It's kind of like it's kind of a huge pool. It's not even a pool. It's like an ocean. So if you go there, it's probably a lot harder in terms of if you're going to get up to that next stage. Where of course you could go maybe. You can look at AEW, and I know people are quite critical with what they've done, but again, it's not. It's a smaller pool. It's a lake compared to the WWE at the moment. But my friend, we're coming to the end of the show, unfortunately. But I've got to say, I need to get you back on again because just shooting the breeze here, just talking wrestling, very natural, very easy. It's nice for a change because often my guests are from a completely different generation. And when I say, I'll ask them the question, when did you first get into it? It's like playing my video game in 2001 on SmackDown. I'm like, oh my God, where are we talking about here? So it's a completely different ball game. But it's nice to talk with somebody who comes from the same sort of generation I grew up on as well. So it's been fantastic having you, my friend. And I want to thank you so much for giving your time to come on. But let's get people over to you. Obviously, you're available on powered4.tv and, of course, YouTube. Where else can we find you, my friend? Let's hear all your socials.
You can find me on Twitter at _Straight Talk, on Instagram and Facebook. I know Facebook is archaic. That's from our time period. Nobody else does Facebook. But you can find us on at Straight Talk Wrestling. YouTube is Straight Talk Wrestling. Power 4 TV, Straight Talk Wrestling. And I'm on all the audio platforms. So you can find me on any podcast platform that's out there. If there's not one that I'm on, DM me so I can get on there so you can find me easier.
Check out now, Straight Talk Wrestling. Big shout out as well to the mini host for sure. And I hope that everything in due time goes well. You got to wait for those teenage years, my friend, because that might throw you out completely. And then I don't know.
You see this? You see this? Look at it. It's sitting. It's sitting like crazy here in the front, and that's from being the honor of being a girl dad to two wonderful young ladies who test me every day. But I wouldn't change it for the world. Wouldn't change it.
Absolutely. So thank you very much for watching, everybody. We'll see you next time.